Good morning, everybody. I'm Sam Albrecht, the Director of the Office of Regulatory Oversight. We're here to talk about the implementation of Senate Bill 25-002 and the regional building codes. I work, of course, in the Division of Housing and I work with the Building Codes and Standards section. Donnie Featherman is our program manager, and he's here too. And this is a public meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee. And with that, I am going to share my screen and we'll walk through a few of the standard slides, then hit the agenda slides, and then spend time just to frame it for everybody. Take a look at the two different rulemakings that we're talking about doing, Rulemaking 1 and Rulemaking 2. And there's my share button. All right, can you guys see that screen okay?
Yes.
No, maybe?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
Yep. Thanks. So again, we'll go over ground rules for the public, and then we'll talk about just to flash up the resource slides for the new people. As you go through these TAC meetings, we'll have the core TAC members every single time, but we get public members every now and then that jump in and jump out, and I want to make sure that they have the background on where we are and what we're doing and where to go for additional resources with respect to this work that we're doing today. So ground rules for the public. Again, we appreciate your participation in this. It's an important process, and we want to make sure that all public members are welcome and are heard. We recommend typing your questions into the chat or raising your hand. And then because we give priority to TAC members, if you don't have an opportunity to share, or for TAC members or non-TAC members after the fact, if you want to reach out to us with comments on what we've done here today, please send me an email. My email address is sam.albrecht@state.co.us. So the resources that we use are, of course, the statute. These are all hot links on the slide deck. We will post the slide deck with the recording in just a few days. If you're looking for the resources, though, you can go back to the previous meetings. It's the same resource slide in every slide deck. I did tweak one a little bit, so we look at this one a little bit. So this is be the one we use going forward. There's a hot link to the actual bill itself that we are driving a lot of our work from. And then I put in a link to Colorado Legal Resources provided by LexisNexis. I can't link straight to the revised statute. What you have to do as a member of the public is to go to that legal resources and then search in the go to drill down. It's a drill down menu. Drill down to 24, then go down to 32, and then 3301 through 3329 will pop up for you. The administrative rules is a new link. It was recently put up on the Secretary of State's website. So there's a new link on this one from the previous rules. But it's just the update that we did in Rule 3 that took effect on the 31st of July. And then, of course, links to our two websites that we deal with, and that's the Building Codes and Standards website and the Technical Advisory Committee website. So Rulemaking 1, I just wanted to flash this schedule up here one more time to let everybody know kind of where we are and what we've got ahead of us. So August 26th is the when we're our target to have the comprehensive draft proposed rules sent to the TAC and to interested parties. So that will be our next meeting of the TAC. I'm sorry, that will be an email out when we're trying to get all that information out to everybody. September 3rd will be the meeting for the TAC and interested parties to discuss and finalize those rules. And as you noticed, TAC members, you got a draft set, a red line copy of the administrative rules with what we're going to talk about today. And what we'll do is try to provide an update on in every meeting on these are the rules that we're going to be discussed. And those rules will be listed in the tax slides. September 30th is our final notice of rules proposed for rulemaking to be published. We will file that notice with the Secretary of State under their rulemaking process. And then November 4th, we are going to have the public hearing on those rules as required. And that will be in front of the State Housing Board. And I already have time set on their calendar to hear us on November 4th. And then December 10th, the adopted rules will be do the final publication. And then December 30th, the permanent rules will go into effect. So Rulemaking 1 content. We've made some changes here since last week, and we will drill down into each of these, right? One is to modify, number one here is to allow the business entities to have multiple qualified individuals working for them and be covered with a single certificate of insurance and single financial security in a business entity registration. We have deferred back to what statute says, and that is calling for a business entity to have multiple individuals. And then we'll talk a little bit about single exits in certain multifamily structures. We have draft rules proposed for those, and I'll flash those up on the screen too, so that everybody can see that. And then we'll look at the accessibility. We are recommending maybe moving that to Rulemaking 2 if it's needed. And we'll talk about why. And then the Wildland Urban Interface Code, also moving that to Rulemaking 2 as we work through some of the challenges there. And we'll spend a little time on that Wildland Urban Interface Code. I've picked Larimer County to talk about. And we'll drill down into some of the maps. I took screenshots of some of those maps, and I want everybody having a really good understanding of the challenges we have on a regional code side with respect to the Wildland Urban Interface Code. So for the installers, we have draft language for the business entities complete and ready for review. What we still need to do is prepare the draft language for business entities that have qualified certified installers. So that's Rule 612 and the sub rules there. And so we're going to have another meeting this week on that. If you guys have any suggestions or ideas on what that looks like, if you have a certified installer and a non-certified installer working for a business entity, how that might work out within the statutory framework that we work in. And then as we talked about last week a little bit, we talked about clarifying language added for expiration of insurance, financial surety, and registration dates. So with that, I want to stop sharing this slide deck and jump into what the draft, give everybody just a moment to ask any questions on where we are and where we're headed for this meeting before I bring up the actual administrative rules. All right, any questions so far? Did everybody get both the red line copy of the administrative rules and the draft slide deck that I sent out last week? Or when did I send that out? Friday, I think. Okay, good. Yep. I see you nodding. Thank you. Sometimes when I share screen, I lose everybody. So, please let me know if you want me to stop and we'll get all caught up together. All right, let me share these draft rules. All right, can everybody see the draft rules? Assuming so, I'll keep going. Looks good on my end. So rule 3.14, we just clarified in installer for individual or business. We have a statutory cap on what we can charge for installers. And so we just kept that fee the same. So that was just a clarification. You see the red line in the parenthesis on that. The real meat of the change is down in Rule 6. And this is what we discussed last week, or not last week, 2 weeks ago, and kind of is our working final draft at this point in time. Of course, we can tweak it if there's any questions or concerns, but this is where we are with 610.2, 610.2.1 through 610.2.5. And then the follow-on of that, of course, is the clarification in 610.3 for the expiration of documents. Any questions on any of that? Tim, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Can you blow that up a little bit just for the screen? I know I have it. I don't have two screens and to pull up my one you sent me.
Is that getting bigger for you, Tim? How's that?
Perfect. Yep, thank you.
So this is a new section below the individual installer piece. And Donnie's had some definitions in there for what an installer is. And this is from statute, right, Donnie?
Yeah, it's in statute.
Yep.
33, was it 3302? Number 17.
Pausing to give everybody just a chance to digest this. Any questions on this? And again, we have time to tweak. If you remember that calendar schedule, we've got like till the 26th of August to finalize this language. But after that date, that's kind of a publication date that it will be. We can still modify after we send it out in the Colorado Online Register, but that is what will be proposed. Okay, if there's not any questions on this, I want to scroll down to the other one where we talk about the expiration dates. Oops. My cursor got real sensitive. This is 610.3. And the key word here on this one is shall. And so that means basically installations have to stop because you don't qualify any longer as a registered installer. Down here is where we use the word recommended. It's recommended that the applicant line up all their expiration dates. Does that make sense to everybody?
You gonna make a little context, Sam, on the 10.3 part?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just real quick, the 6.10.3, the reason why we put this in there as part of the draft was because we have currently the way that applications are submitted to us for new registrations and renewals is that a letter of credit, certificate of deposit, or the insurance and the bond. Sometimes whenever they're submitted to us, they have two different expiration dates on there. And so although in the system it shows that, let's just say that somebody expires 8/1 of 2025, but their insurance or their bond might actually expire 7/1 of 2025, right? And they would continue to do installations because in Salesforce they're showing as still being active. But per the statute, in order to do installations, one, you have to be registered with the state, but two, you have to provide the liability insurance, and you also have to provide a coverage from a financial institution. So if you're missing one of those two documents, or one of those two documents are expired, then you are not meeting the minimum requirements for doing installations in the state of Colorado. So it's always up to the installer to make sure that they're keeping up and monitoring when their letter of credit or whatever the financial institution document and the liability insurance expires, because they can't do installations if it's expired, even though they're active in the system. They have to renew or submit updated documentation to us to continue to do installations and maintain their active status. Okay, and then currently we send out a 60-day, a 30-day, and an expiration date email to the applicant. That's an automatic email based on that date, letting them know that their registration is going to expire. So, but it's always going to be based on the date that's inputted in there for their Salesforce status. It's not in there currently with the date of the insurance or the date of the surety or the financial institution document.
Thank you, Donnie. Tawny, you had your hand up patiently.
Yes, I just wanted to give you a heads up. On 610.3.2, there's just a typo. It says letter of credit, and the L in letter of credit is capitalized, but it's not anywhere else.
Yeah, I caught that too. So that's right here, everybody. I'll change that. And I'm wondering if the expires should be expires, but I'll work that out. So I'll fix that. Thank you, Tawny. All right, any other questions on this? All right, cool. Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to the slide deck. Well, I'm trying to go back to the slide deck. Oh, that's it. All right, so the next one was where we were talking a couple weeks ago about the single stairwell and the change in statute. So as we talked about then, we were recommending amending the IBC 2021 by adding some language, a 2.17, the numbers of exit access doorways changed to, or adding section 1006.1, and then add 1006.1 single exit in certain multifamily residential structures for multifamily residential structures that meet the requirements of Colorado Revised Statute 3028-213 or 3115-604, which is basically your counties and your municipalities. A single exit may serve no more than 5 stories of a group R2 occupancy. Now let me jump back to the draft rules that I sent out. and show you what that actually looks like in Rule 2 under the IBC. Sorry for the fast scrolling, bear with me. So this is what it would look like. Let me share. So this is actually what it would, I think I shared screen instead of shared app. There we go. I think I can make that a little bigger for you guys too. So this is what it looks like. This is the way we adopt our IBC codes. They are adopted, for example, the 2021 IBC as amended by the TAC and the State Housing Board. So this is the way that we, for example, if you see the old 2.1.7 deleted chapter 13 in the IBC. So this is the way that we would word that. And then I will have to renumber all the 2.17 becomes 2.8 throughout the document. But until we get to all the final changes to the IBC, I'm not going to go through and redline all the numbers yet. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. So would the onus be on the applicant to prove through their permit submittal to show that if they're proposing to do this, like a 5-story single stair, that they're over 100,000, the jurisdiction's 100,000 or more, over 100,000, and has the accredited. So that's more just in the details of a plan review rather than just delineating the general requirement. Maybe Donnie.
No, that's the way I see that working.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thanks.
Yep. Dean?
Yeah, a quick question of clarification. Perhaps somebody else on the call might know the answer to this, but there was some gray area in that statute which raised question if heavy timber type 4 construction did meet those CRS requirements in that obviously would have an impact to this amendment, but the way that it's worded, there's some language in there that says non-combustible, which would rule heavy timber out, but there's been a great deal of discussion saying heavy timber would comply. Do you know if heavy timber would comply with single stair compliance?
No, Dean, I don't know. You can use, does anybody else know the answer to whether or not that would work?
I think technically,
I was just thinking, I don't remember that coming up when we were putting together the legislation, so I'd have to get with the governor's office.
It's my understanding that would not be allowed because it's technically not non-combustible by definition in the IBC. What I would suggest that if something like that were to come into my jurisdiction, they have to request an alternate method and design and show that the heavy timber with the char factor, et cetera, there's a lot of studies out there that would show from the burn, and it's, the premise of all the type 4 provision. But that would be my suggestion, at least from a plan review standpoint for your team.
It's questionable how if you could use it anyway, because if you look through the provisions of type 4 construction, it says that you can't have any concealed spaces. So now all your plumbing, mechanical, and electrical would have to be left exposed. I mean, just kind of look at the feasibility, type 1, type 2, or type 4 construction. Seems like all three of those is gonna add enormous cost to the construction. So does anybody use this exception to the code anyway? That'd be my question, but
Other thoughts? Dean, do you want to keep this discussion going?
Well, it's
Dean
just
and-
would be good to have some clarity just from a general perspective as well as it applies to offsite permitting as well. So it just seems to be a topic of debate now ever since that did get passed. And as a designer, I don't have a lot of clarity on it. So I'm not sure how anybody else is interpreting this because
Dean,
obviously it hasn't been implemented yet.
Dean, this is Megan. Could you possibly send me an email with just the citations and the question, and I can follow up?
Sure thing, Megan. No problem.
Thanks.
My thought is from this committee's perspective is that we're kicking it out to the new statute, that passed, and it needs to stay there. So if they make a change there, it'll just flow through to us. And so like, if a change needs to be made at that level, that's obviously like, not our place, and so I like that we're just kicking it out to the version that's out there. So if it gets changed, then that will flow through to us.
Yeah, I would assume, thanks, Nate, for that. I would assume that this question would come up whether it was an on-site constructed building or a modular building, either one.
Correct. Right. So that'll get sorted out at a state level, and then whatever they decide is what, if we're referencing that statute, then that's what we'll implement into our system.
Yep. All right, great. Dean, thanks for bringing that up. We're going to see a lot more questions about heavy timber, mass timber usage. I'm trying to go to a mass timber summit on August 21st to learn a little bit more about that. And one of our TAC members is actually speaking at that, Dean.
Yes, indeed.
If you can open the back door, I'll sneak in and I'll come in and listen to your session.
Sounds great.
Thank you. All right. So that takes care of that one. Going back to the slide deck. So I believe that was all the redlined rules that we were going to talk about today. So if you have any other further questions on that, please let me know. I'd be happy to help resolve those before the next meeting. All right, so accessibility, this is one that we have talked about a lot, and there is a 9-5, Colorado Revised Statute 9-5 talks about accessibility in state, local, and federally funded housing, right? And then 25-1030 requires that that all buildings meet the accessibility requirements as listed in one of the last two code sets. So we think that, let me just jump to the bottom line here. I think we're compliant with 1030 as we're on the 2021 ICC, right? And we've not amended the accessibility requirements that are currently in the ICC. So until the 2027 code set is adopted, which is going to be late 26, then we're probably okay. Now, I'm not saying that there is some conflict and clarity issues around what is in 9.5 and how it relates to the 2021 and 2024 code set, right? So we're going to continue working as Momisco briefed a while back. There was an effort at one point in time to look at changes in 9-5. And we're going to continue working with that group of folks that were working on 9-5. And if anybody else wants to help with that, please let us know. Shoot me an email and we'll loop you in there too about potential changes to 9-5. And hopefully clarifying anything that is different based on the 2021 and the current 2021 and 2024 code set. If there are differences that come up in your design or your implementation, we'll try to work those out with you if there's a discrepancy between 9-5 and 10-30. Tim, you had a really good question in the chat about the Mass Timber Summit. I can send that to you, or Dean, if you've got that, the information on that and can send it out to the group, that'd be fantastic in the chat. So when 2027 is adopted, like I said, in 26, we've got a couple things to look at. One is we might have to do another rulemaking to ensure that we meet the accessibility standards. Or we could do it by amending the accessibility sections of the 2024 code set or the 2027 code set into our 2021 code set. As you know, we've done this before with the IRC. Basically what we did for the when we added tiny homes, we amended the 2021 Appendix AQ into our 2018 code set. So that is a possibility because we can amend these codes. So we can stay on the 2021 code set by adopting the 2021 accessibility standards into the 2024 accessibility standards. This also ties in with an update to the ANSI 117.1. We're all on the 2017 version of that, I think, and there's a 2023 update in place. I've got another slide on this, but I also wanted to very clearly state what 1030 does for us in the code set. So in 25.10.30, there's a section called out for 24.32.707. This is the State Housing Board section, and basically it's saying that the board shall ensure that when the standards and codes prescribed in 1B and 1C of the section, which is our code set, are substantially amended, the standards and codes meet or exceed the accessibility requirements in one of the two most recent versions, which is our talk about 24 and 27, as adopted by the ICC or a successor organization. So if there are, and Dean, I didn't prep you for this, but do you see any conflicts with 9.5 and 10.30 currently that we need to work out? Or does anybody else see any conflicts? And Tim, I know you and Donnie were had some email exchanges on the source document for all this, which is the 117.1, if I remember right.
Yeah, and from my perspective, Sam, I'll certainly require some further study. Accessibility, as we all know, is kind of like a house of cards. So if you move one card, you put the whole thing at risk of actually still working. So just have to really go through that with a fine-tooth comb.
Great. Tim?
Yeah, I agree with that. With the 9.5, the update has to be clear that it starts to reference the latest versions of the A117, because that's been the problem that we've had. And I think all jurisdictions that enforce it, I think there are quite a few that aren't even aware that that's been a piece of legislation for many, many years. And because I know I talked to my colleagues, they go, I've never even heard of that. But with that being said, that's the big move, because of the visitable. And it really just, 9.5 just deals with townhomes. In fact, like 3 unit plus, so because of the multifamily, if it's an R2, that's all done through the IBC. But I agree with Dean. I mean, it needs work, Sam, and I'm interested in helping. I know I had asked Tom Myers to get me on that several years ago, and I think that went by the wayside. But if it comes back up, I'd like to be a part of that.
All right, great. Thank you, Tim. The other thing I was thinking of, and Dean, you mentioned this, or Tim did, I don't remember which, is that a lot of time our people don't even know 9.5 is out there as a building code requirement. And maybe what we should do is also reference on our website someplace the applicable codes for these type units, that they must be compliant with 9.5. Since I've been here, we've only had one call from a local jurisdiction who wanted us to help deconflict a 9.5 issue with a site-specific exception because of the grade on the property, and we worked through that with them. All right, everybody okay with kicking this down the road and then just deconflicting as necessary? All right, cool. Dean, okay, Dean's thumbs up. Good. Thank you. All right, so we're going to jump to Wildfire Resiliency Code, and there's 5 slides on this, and several of these are maps, right? I have reached out. Chris Burnett was tentative on this meeting, and he let me know beforehand he wasn't going to make it. I have reached out to Chris Burnett with Department of Fire Prevention and Control to maybe come to a future meeting and answer more detailed questions, especially before we get to development of the regional codes, right? So let's take a look at Larimer County. What we could also do is, ask Eric up in Larimer County to come online too at some point and do another deep dive in how he's handling Larimer County's wildland urban interfaces. But so this next set of slides kind of just is setting the stage for further discussion. If you remember back into the earlier in the slide deck, I'm saying that we may want to defer that. So here's Larimer County. Starts up here at the top at the Wyoming line, comes down the divide, runs across to almost to Johnstown, and then up and captures a lot of I-25, right? So that is primarily, that is the county boundary for Larimer County. This is the wildland fire map for Larimer County. And so the current building officials have all seen this, right? And they're starting to implement this. And I'm going to drill down into this into a lot of different details, but this makes it a huge challenge. Well, I won't say huge. It makes it a challenge for us as we try to factor in how this would work for regional building codes, right? And even what we do to enforce and to allow our manufacturers to be able to meet the permitting requirements that are being implemented by the different jurisdictions. So remember, and my next slide will say this in a little bit more detail, but let me go through and just drill down on a couple of these slides and point out some areas of concern, right? Some challenging areas. What you see is the low intensity stuff is the yellow. I assume that if it's not within the map at all, then it isn't it doesn't fall into a wildland urban interface zone at all. The hash mark stuff is federal and tribal, and we don't deal with that. And then class 2 is where you actually start looking at structure hardening with moderate intensity and high intensity. And so we're really talking about the yellow, orange, and reds. So you can see areas where you've got orange on either side of a strip of yellow. You've got federal lands on the outside. There's just a lot of hexagonal type mapping that is going to make it kind of tough to figure. So let me go to the next map. Let me go back. So I'm going to look at this area right in here a little bit, just on the other side of Horsetooth, right? So here's Horsetooth. You've got orange, red, orange, red, 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 yellow, yellow. And you start seeing some of the challenges where you have subdivisions that are split right down the middle with yellow, which is low intensity, and orange, which is moderate intensity. Going to drill down one more. Here's that subdivision where you've got some stuff that's orange, some stuff that's yellow. Right across the road, you've got ones that have low intensity and no zoning at all. And so that's some of the challenges that I'm facing. And so what I'd like to do is take a look at this next slide and just set the base. And then I want to get some discussion from our current code officials that are living and breathing this every day. There's a hot link here to the resiliency code page, and it also has the map there. 23-166 requires the governing bodies to comply with permitting, and it does not call out that it's looking at their definitions of governing bodies. The State Housing Board does not meet the definition of a governing body in 23-166. 25002 limits the authority of DFPC regarding installation of a unit. And then going way back to 22-1242, which was the tiny home bill, that added wildfire risk to the local design criteria. So that kind of gives you the background of where we are today, right? And back there, when we implemented tiny homes, we added rules that said we would defer to the local requirements for wildfire mitigation risk. There are, in that wildfire resiliency code, there's two sections there that are relative to what we do. One is the factory built structures, 101.2.2, that the structure hardening provisions of this code that we're talking about, the wildfire resiliency code adopted by the state, are in accordance with rules adopted by Division of Housing and Rule 2 codes and standards. And then, of course, it exempts the HUD code stuff for the manufacturers that are building HUD code and modular. Your HUD units are going to be exempt from structure hardening on their first installation. And you should be able to get your permit with that for the HUD code homes. What this doesn't say up here, though, is that my concern is we're going to run into a lot of local governments that are not going to allow a permit to a modular unit within the, if they're not structure hardened based on the map. And so what we want to do is be proactive and come up with a resolution for this. I'm going to stop here for just a second and ask Tim and Don and Sam, and Sean, Rogan to kind of talk about how you're implementing, this wildfire resiliency code. Anybody want to go first?
I'm happy to start.
Okay, Tim, you go first and then I'll go to you, Sam.
We have not adopted this yet. I'm in the process of going through the preliminary meetings with our council to come up with the plan. So I don't have the experience, so I'm really open to be hearing some of the experience. I know some of my colleagues adjacent to me, Boulder County in particular, have been enforcing that Ron Flax for quite a while. So just wanted to lay the stage, at least for Broomfield.
Does Boulder County have their own map, or do they defer to a different map?
They have a map. Yep.
Okay.
And it's everything west of Highway 93 or Highway 36, whatever you want to call it, is it previously had always been in like the high strength, high wildfire. And then about 6 months or a year, maybe after the Marshall Fire, they went back and added the eastern half of the county, so to speak, all the way over to County Line Road, into like the low, like a yellow zone for the, like hardening #1. So the way that state legislation reads, a jurisdiction has to have, if they have a map in place, it has to be at least as restrictive or more. And you have to take that and prove it. And they're supposed to be uploading a committee that isn't in place yet at the state to review everybody's map. And in particular, Broomfield, we are going to be hiring a third-party company to do an area, because I've got a similar subdivision like the map you just showed. It's kind of in the middle up in the northeast portion of, it's called Wilcox neighborhood, and it's all red and it's surrounded by some yellow and mostly nothing. It makes no sense that right in the middle of our city we've got a high wildfire. So but that's their map at the state. So we're going to have to hire a company to try to redo that, and then we got to take the map to the state and hopefully get that changed. So it's going to be quite a lengthy process.
Thank you, Tim. Sam?
Yeah, San Miguel County and which Telluride and Mountain Village are in, and we all, the 3 jurisdictions and the fire marshal met, because the maps are kind of general. It's kind of hard to zoom down in and see what individual properties. So we're talking about a number of things, like Tim mentioned, probably having to get a third-party consultant. Our fire marshal said the Western fire personnel people they can help you out with individual pieces of property, because it doesn't really make sense sometimes where it's high intensity, mid intensity, which are about the same thing from a point of view of what you have to do.
Yes.
So it's and again in Telluride, it's a small community and houses are close together, and it'll be a big deal. So, and I agree with Tim. I think it's going to be a long process. I don't think the state's giving people any real, or local jurisdictions any choices about going below what they're saying. But I think you have to prove that individual properties or lots, or however you want to put it, are not exactly in the zone that they're purported to be. I know that's kind of what we found out up here. So
that's my understanding too, Sam. Thank you.
welcome.
Don, Sean, either one of you guys have any experience or thoughts on how you guys are going to implement this for on-site construction?
Well, we have our own fire hazard mitigation codes up here that are regulated through the 2 local fire jurisdictions. So I'm still waiting to hear from them to see what their plan is, if they're going to work together, what they're going to do with the mapping and so on. But I'm assuming they're going to modify the regulations to comply with the state, and then just keep doing what they do. All building permits got to be signed off for fire hazard mitigation. So I'm assuming they're just going to change it I haven't really dove into the maps yet, but being in Summit County, assuming we're pretty much in the red zone everywhere, but maybe we have some yellow and orange. I looked at it briefly the other day, and I'm not sure how they're going to deal with that. If they're going to try to remap it or just go with the flow.
So that's going to be the other interesting thing. Donnie, I'll call on you in just a second. My understanding is that there will be the state map, and then there will be a list of amended maps, right? And if you're building in, so there won't be one reference, there may be multiple references to wildfire mitigation that drive the design criteria. Donnie?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, you know, as part of this WRC code, you know, I'm not sure if we explained it well last time, but you know, the whole point of trying to get this situated is because, you know, in relation to the regional building codes or zones that we create, you know, we can modify this in our rules in a way that it's applicable to the structures that we produce in our program. You know, right now, you know, as we can see, is a more relatable subject is the Colorado Energy, the solar and electric ready requirements, right? That code is a state code that didn't have much input from the factory built structure industry. And so there's a lot of things that are being done or that are in that code that conflict with what we do here, right? Because there's a lot of structures that it might not be applicable to. So the more we look into this WRC code, and the more we can relate to how we can modify it to fit our regional building code, the better. So it's really important that you all look into this WRC and see what we can do to combine it with the regional building codes. As Sam was showing you on the maps, there's going to be jurisdictions that have multiple criteria for the WRC, right? And if you looked at one of those maps, you can see that a couple of the properties actually had two different requirements on a couple of them, right? But a part of the statute or the bill that was passed, it states that we had to go with the most stringent requirement for the jurisdictions, right? But in some cases, some of those jurisdictions are going to have the most extreme class 2 heavy or the high fire requirements, while maybe there's a majority of it's going to have maybe mild or none, right? So how do we create that regional building code to implement this code to be the most stringent, but also not be a cost item for homes that are going to a jurisdiction that there's one area that's red and the rest is clear or yellow, right? So maybe some things that we can think about is maybe going with the most stringent for the location that it's going, because it's still the most stringent for that location or that jurisdiction, but it might not apply, that home or that structure might not be able to be installed in the other portions of that jurisdiction, right? Or we can go the most extreme route and say, hey, you know, there's red in this jurisdiction, then you must build that unit to the class 2 high hazard, and then it can go anywhere within that jurisdiction, even if it is in a clear zone or a yellow zone, right? So there's multiple ways we can look at this, but it's important that you guys look into it, and then try to see how we can implement it as part of the regional building code adoption when we start working on that. Hopefully my message came across clear, but we have to really think about how we're going to implement this into the requirements.
Donnie, is the idea that when it gets implemented into the regional code, let's just say you take that most extreme version, whatever it is, whatever we can, you know, semi-standardize on, however that looks, that then the plan review process for that would be done through Division of Housing review?
Yeah, so if we adopt, let's just say we went this route where we just adopt the WRC as is, right? And we use that map as part of our plan review process, right? If we adopt this as is, it doesn't matter what the locals adopt and amend to their WRC. This code is ours under our rules because we adopted it as is. So no matter where that structure goes in the state of Colorado, we're following the same code, and we don't have to follow the locals amended code of the WRC. So if you submit a plan to us and you say, hey, I'm designing this structure to a class 2 high hazard, well, depending on the other zones that you pick for snow, wind, and other requirements, it can go into any of those zones, even if that local said they're class 2, but they made a more stringent class 2 code, right? We adopted the state minimum code and we amended it to fit our needs so that no matter where it goes within that region or regional building codes, it's still compliant with the state, the 2432 or 2432, 3300 requirements, right? So that's why I said it's very important we look into this and how we can adopt this. We can either just do, to me, I think it should be a simple adoption, but that's why Tim and Sean and Sam and Don, all your input, even your counterparts at other local jurisdictions, if you get input from them, how can we implement this as is? And if we can implement it as is there anything that we're missing that that actually makes this a little bit more complicated to adopt as is, right? Because we are going to have some jurisdictions that they have a more stringent fire code, right? But this is the state's minimum, saying that this is a board that was put together and said, hey, what are everybody's concerns about the wildfire code, and how can we implement this statewide to have a minimum standard, right? And we all agree on it, and they all agreed on this, right? And so if we adopt that code, then it'll be easier to say like, hey, this is what the state approved. This is what we're going to use, right? And then we can amend it how we need it to fit our needs, right? So that's the goal. Sorry, Sam, you're on mute.
Yeah, hi.
Go ahead, Tim or Dean.
Okay. I understand what your thought process, Donnie, is. My concerns with that, I mean, both from Broomfield, but as a general board, just the board member, is if you have, I think you pointed out there are going to be some jurisdictions that have existing maps that they've had in place for many, many years, have gone through wildfires. They feel that that's the appropriate map, and it's more restrictive, possibly, than the state code, which is minimum. I agree with the state map. And I think you're going to have some issues with the locals starting to come back and saying, we need to have higher wildfire protection on units, whether they're manufactured or stick built. Or, on the other hand, you may have a situation, let's say, just for example, Broomfield's successful in reducing our map based on our ground study, and we get it approved. And then now the state code is the state map, if you adopt it through the Division of Housing, is more restrictive, and then it's going to be not fair. The last meeting, I kind of pointed out, made a comment anyway, that, the way the state wildfire was adopted, it really goes against the concept of where this group, our board group, is going for regional. Because if you go, we've talked about that just from a wind study or snow study, you want to make it, we've got to make it such that we're keeping the affordability in place. And now, you've got a lot of jurisdictions, the maps Sam was pointing out, you've got, red right next to yellow, right next to nothing. And, it just, I think we got to be real careful in terms of going down the path of just, say, adopting the state map as it is in relation, and then another point, I mentioned this at the last meeting, that the state is not planning on providing a list of approved alternate maps. They told me that in a public meeting we had in our city council meeting a couple of weeks back. They are not going to be the ones who are going to keep that. So if you have the state map for jurisdictions that don't have a map, the manufacturers or, you know, the plan reviewers, you guys will have to be going to that jurisdictional website and see what does their map look like, or the manufacturer going to have to know that before they go make the bill. So those are my comments. You know, as this thing moves forward, I'm going to be a proponent of, I don't think a regional approach is going to work, adopting that map as is. But anyway, so.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And so what you're saying, it'd be helpful if you could put those into notes and an email to Sam and I, so we can maybe further expand on those concerns, because maybe there's some concerns that you have that other jurisdictions weren't thinking about, right? And so we can actually start this conversation a little bit more in depth, because like I said, it's important we really focus on these individual tasks so that we can get this stuff implemented by July 1st of next year. But if we don't put much thought into it, then when we adopt something that is negatively affecting the program, then we don't want to do that, right? So the more thoughts we put into this, the better.
Sam, this is Nate. Could I add a little bit of just a perspective? Is, you know, from a kind of a factory and you know, on the designer side of things, you know, there's always this push and pull, and what we're all talking about, where, you know, push it to the local and then pull it back to the regional, or even pull it back even higher to the state level. And obviously the idea with modular is that it, you know, has a state oversight for the broadness of it and the need for standardization. And so, like, I would say, like, I do hope we can get to adopting something that is statewide, because what we're trying to avoid is having 380 different maps that we have to go find and follow. That's completely counterproductive to everything that we're trying to do with SB 002. And so, you know, like, I don't know where the happy medium is, and that's what this committee is supposed to figure out. And like, you know, Tim and I've been on this committee for probably 12 years together almost. And so I always appreciate kind of that perspective, but we're also working towards standardization, not moving away from it. And so the last thing I'll say is, I kind of have this idea, just to kind of throw it out there as everybody thinks and talks about this, is that if a jurisdiction would like to submit to the Division of Housing a map that will be enforced at the state level during the plan review, totally fine, but they have to submit it. We're not going to go find 380 of them. And then we could have a place where we can go to look and see what would be enforced in that area, but we're not tracking them down. And when they publish a new one, if their new one isn't submitted to the Division of Housing, well, guess what? We're enforcing the old one that was logged. You know, and so what we're trying to get away from in this is where, you know, I mean, I remember when I started in modular housing, trust me, there wasn't a fire department in the state that was doing a plan review on our stuff. You know, now there's just kind of this other aspect of the fire review that's kind of come up over the years. And so I really, really would like to get it to where the Division of Housing has enough information to be able to do a full plan review at the state level. That's the whole idea of our program. I'm not saying we can't get some local items possibly enforced, but the whole issue we've always had is tracking them down and keeping them. And so anyway, those are my thoughts for now. And obviously we'll pick this up as it goes down the road.
Nate, thank you. Those are good thoughts. I appreciate that. Dean?
Yeah, so great conversation here, and what Nate just said is actually really, as usual, brilliant, because Nate says brilliant things. But in my mind, I'm getting this whole conversation is kind of giving me some FEMA PTSD, because we're talking about maps. We're talking about maps that probably change over time based on land use and patterns of development, right? So right now, we've all been talking about this in the context of a static map that will never change, but it will absolutely change, right? And when does it change? How frequently does it change? And how does that apply to local jurisdictions? And then coupled with the fact that, you know, is there or will there be a letter of map revision process where a developer who's developing 100 acres is actually changing the nature of the fire risk by virtue of the sheer land that they're redeveloping, right? I mean, that does happen. And so you could effectively change your development from orange to yellow simply by doing the wildfire mitigation across 100 acres. So it raises lots of questions, but Nate's idea, you know, taken one step further, is perhaps the state map is in fact informed directly by a submittal process, and there is only one map, and it gets updated on a regular basis. And each jurisdiction, if they want to amend it, there would be some sort of process to amend a single map that everybody would be able to use. Because I just get very, very concerned about this idea of, you know, what version of which map and when does it get updated and how outdated is it? And I mean, all the problems that we currently have with floodplain design, and the, you know, the aging FEMA maps and the various ways you can amend those maps, I believe will directly apply to this as well, won't they?
Dean, really good points. And from my background, I know you can change floodplains, and that's a federal process, right? But it takes a lot of work to do that. Tim, another thought before I move this along?
You bet. I just respond to Dean's question on the map. It's my understanding from the various public meetings that I sat through with the state fire folks board is that their plan is, it's not in the legislation, but their plan is to reconvene every 3 years to revisit not only some of the board or the code items, but the map itself. So that's my understanding that that's how that's going to be done. I don't know what's going to go into that, or they're going to create a new board and then they go through the, you know, the whole thing. But that's what I recall and some of the feedback I got from the meetings.
And I will say, thank you, Tim. I will say that if you guys are interested in this topic, you should sign up for the, there's a sign up sheet on the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board website for meetings. I think there's something later today on technical assistance to local jurisdictions. Again, a general discussion on that. And I'm going to be lurking on that one a little later today to learn more. And then I really like the idea of possibly coming up with our own map that we have to do, because that may be the easiest thing to do. And of course, we can talk to DFPC to make sure that they recognize our map also for factory built structures. And Megan, that
Well,
and Megan and Donnie, that
Sam,
might be
let me,
discussion we want to do. Go ahead, Don.
this is Nate. I just want to clarify my comment, my idea, if you will, is it's not so much creating our own map, because I think that is going to be a challenge, but it's more having a place where jurisdictions, if they want to log with the Division of Housing their map, that then the Division of Housing would enforce, that they would be given the opportunity to do that. But if it's not logged, meaning like on the website, you would go in there and there might be 50 of them uploaded. And if we're going to build a house in one of them, we got to go click on theirs and figure it out. But then the Division of Housing will review to that standard and be done with it. And when we go turn in the permit and they say, oh, well, there's a new version of it, we didn't upload it to Division of Housing. Well, too bad. That, you know, like you have the opportunity to update it, but what's there is there, and we're not tracking down all sorts of stuff all over the state.
Right. And then Nate, so this is an extension of the conversation you and I have had many times about, wouldn't it be nice if we had all the design criteria for all the locations in the state in a single place, right? So
correct. And this is the thing where if they don't upload it, we don't have it. So we have then the map that we would enforce, which would be the statewide minimum map.
Yeah. And just real quick, I had the same idea, and the actually kind of stole it from HUD, right? Because you can get exemptions from HUD, but you have to get an amendment through them, right? So it'd be the same thing if we adopted a minimum map, and the local says, well, we have more stringent requirements, well, then they need to apply for an amendment. So for that location, so that we have record of it. And then we just say, hey, when it gets applied, let's say in Summit County, and Summit County has a more stricter requirement. We can say, Summit County, please submit your amendment. We'll keep that on file. So when we do our review, we can say, oh, it's going to Summit County. You actually have to comply with this map, not the map that's on the website, right? But we would have that record, and so that's another way, right? But again, let's
The same thing.
keep building the thoughts and see how we can put this together.
All right, cool. Don?
I just kind of had a question for Tim, where he's been a lot of these meetings, and how closely is the state working with the federal government? Because we have daily basis. We see fire breaks getting cut in, controlled burns, subdivisions will get wildfire grants, do a lot of clearing, add fire suppression, holding tanks for fire trucks to get water out of. This is kind of the way of life up here in the mountains. We see this stuff happening on a daily basis. So I just kind of, wondering how well did the state, when they created these wildfire maps, did they work with both, local fire districts that are doing a lot of these wildfire mitigation projects, but also the Forest Service, who is continually doing clear cutting and fire breaks and all this different mediation work. This is kind of a huge can of worms, actually.
And so, Don, I can answer some of that, and that is that the wildfire resiliency map is based on Colorado Fire Service, their map. So they put some thought into it. As far as federal help, it's going to be changing, right? We're in a time of change there. So it may be even tougher to get wildfire mitigation grants for subdivisions. Here in the county, when a few years back in my previous life, we looked at all our subdivisions, and our first thought was, we've got a lot of problem, right? We've got subdivisions with a single exit in and out. And what if the wind's blowing the wrong way? And oh, by the way, you can't dip out of ponds in the winter. The helicopters just can't break through the ice, right? And you've got a tougher. We've tried. You've got a tougher situation up there, so you've got to have, every fire hydrant, and we have a lot of area in the county without a fire hydrant, right? We can't even tap into the fire hydrant, so we're looking at, the fairgrounds as a staging point to fill tanks the day of, in order for the helicopters to dip and pull water.
Yeah.
But
I do
anyway.
like Nate's idea of creating something that requires a local jurisdiction to provide the updates, not the other way around. But
Right.
that's going to be like herding cats also. Part of it up here is we're seeing a lot of turnover. You just don't. There's not a lot of institutional knowledge in a lot of instances up here, because it's just people don't stick around that long.
Yep. All right, so I want to move this along a little bit. Thank you for this discussion. I think I'm still sharing my screen. So this is straight off of that Wildfire Resiliency Code website. They adopted the code and the map on July 1st. By April 1 of 26, the codes have to be adopted by the jurisdictions. And their jurisdiction is adopted by the governing body, of which we are not one. And then July 2026 to be compliant. And that is the latest that anybody could be. The asterisk there kind of explains the adoption cycle. So here's where I think we are right now with wildfire. And we have had these discussions, right? Or we've had the background of this. So the options I'm looking at right now are moving it to rulemaking 2, right? because that August 26th is the hard date, and I don't think we're going to have a satisfactory plan in place until we look at it in the context of regional codes. We could adopt the structure hardening of wildland of the WRC, which is based on the 2024 WUI code, Chapter 5, and adopt the wildfire map, or defer it to the local jurisdictions requirements that have already adopted, right? Which we currently do in a way right now. We currently require the manufacturers to design to the locally adopted design criteria, including wildfire risk. We could adopt the 2021 WUI, right? The IWUIC structure hardening requirements, Chapter 5, and adopt the wildfire map. Or we could do nothing and require the design criteria based on site-specific requirements for the locals, which is kind of what I just talked about. The only concern about doing nothing and not adopting something is that the manufacturers are going to be held to that higher requirement if the local jurisdiction has adopted a higher requirement for wildfire risk. And so if we adopt something, and I'm still talking probably in Rule 2, then we have the baseline. If we are looking at, I think that, like Tim was bringing up, the future changes that may be even more restrictive, right? So it's not an all or nothing here. My recommendation is we move it to rulemaking 2, because we're not going to get this resolved by August 26th. Is that okay with everybody? All right, cool. It's 11:50. We're going to jump in, and if you have other thoughts based on this discussion, again, I've had a few members now send me some written comments of the TAC, and they've been very appreciative and have helped guide these discussions. So rulemaking 2 schedule, again, we've got a little more time, but by March 11th is our deadline to have our administrative rules done. We're getting our consultant advertisement out, so we'll do that. We have a project manager identified that will start August 18th, and we will continue to work through these schedules in this date. Now, in light of the discussion that we just had on regions and design criteria and what might work, what I'd like to hear is if any of the manufacturers or the developers and the architects have looked at where the cost points are and what the cost points are. And Megan and I had a side discussion on this too. What's the cost to implement some of these changes, and how is that going to affect production, right? So, Dean, you sent in some comments that said that you guys had looked at it and that it just got so complex that you needed a Cray supercomputer to run and that's not your words. I'm putting words in your mouth, Dean. You needed a Cray supercomputer to do the math and try to come, because you couldn't even come up with an 80% of a structure that met 80% of the design criteria in the state as it stood at that point in time.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the exercise was, could we build one product that worked in 80% of the state? And because of the wild variety of various design criteria, from structural loading to energy to well, heck, to wildfire, we'd be building concrete bunkers as a result, right? I mean, there is no one solution that addresses all of that in an 80th percentile case, because your highest wind load is not necessarily where your highest snow load is. Your most restrictive fire condition, just based on the last conversation, is not necessarily where any of the other most restrictive conditions are. So trying to design to the most restrictive of all of the above was just truly not only a calculus problem, but largely untenable from an actual feasibility standpoint. The part B to that is some of these codes are mutually exclusive. So I'm not allowed under under the code to design for the most restrictive, warmest and coldest climate at the same time. I have to spec equipment that speaks to the specific environment that my project is in. So I can't over design a heating system to try and address two corners of the state. So definitely no easy task.
What about some of the manufacturers that are on the line? Have you guys looked at potential cost points and cost breaks? And I guess the other question, so let's just ask that question first. Has anybody else tried to look at designs or plans that took into account wind load, snow load and I understand the thermal design has to be tied into the temperatures, right? Has anybody else looked at where the price points are for increasing wind load or snow load? Let's just start with two.
We looked into that. This is Nate. You know, because it really comes down to truss packages mostly. You know, from a cost standpoint, and getting a 40-pound snow load truss package or a 120-pound snow load truss package, because most of our buildings don't have much framing changes to deal with wind load, but you know, so it's mostly in the trusses. And like the difference between you know, your typical single family home truss package that varies in those the extreme ranges of the snow load, like that truss package might be probably $7,000 to $8,000 difference, you know, across those. And so, you know, what does that equate to? You know, I don't know if that's the number you're looking for, if you're looking for it in a percentage or a per square foot version. But, you know, it's something. It's not, honestly, it's not like the hugest number in the world in the context of building, you know, what houses cost these days.
Thanks, Nate. Megan?
Nate, did you have some more thoughts there?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're just trying to, just as you just were bringing up, that's perfect, Nate. Like, what are the kind of two inflection points that we need to be aware of for cost? And that $7,000 to $8,000 just rough order of magnitude difference between them is super helpful, I think, in deciding what boundaries on the regions, for example, and what we're going to do highest common denominator. So I think getting those kind of data points and decision making points is super helpful to us.
I agree, Megan. And Donnie, go ahead.
Just real quick. So I actually talked to a couple of manufacturers about like things like the truss, how they order their trusses and stuff like that. And it was, I believe, three manufacturers, but they all said the same thing. The prices of trusses for anywhere from 30-pound to 80-pound is typically the same price, and they charge it by square footage. And then anything over 80 is a slightly higher price per square footage. But for the most part, if you're doing by, I guess, the snow load, I'm not sure if wind load changes anything, but the price is fairly the same, anywhere between 30 to 80, and then anything over 80 is a slightly higher price. I think it was like $1.90 something per square foot for anything less than 80, and then $1 or $2 something per square foot for anything greater than 80 pounds.
Sam, this
In
is
all the
Justin.
years that
I
a
can't
dealer,
find the raise hand button.
Okay, Justin, go ahead. I was hoping you'd jump in.
Yeah, this is probably something I could speak intelligently about. Usually for my experience with modular is they like to over design because they don't want one set location. So they're likely going to over design their truss loads anyway. I don't know that you're going to impact the manufacturer's cost on trusses because of snow loads. I think if there is a change in snow loads, it'll be minimal over what's already being used, and there's probably already some capacity left in most of these truss designs anyway. So
Agreed.
as far as trusses, I don't think you're gonna see an increase in price for snow. And if it is, it'll be minimal. For wind load, can I ask why we're discussing wind load changes?
Well, the wind loads, we still have to take into consideration the location where it's going for wind speed and snow loads, right?
Right, but why are we discussing changing wind loads from what they currently have been?
Well, our concern is that there are, every jurisdiction has picked their own wind load, right? And they picked their own snow load, and thermal settings, usually based on elevation. And so what we're trying to do is figure out if there is a regional solution to put all these different wind loads into groups, right? Sean, you've got your hand up. Maybe you could say it a little better.
Yeah, well, I was just going to chime in on the pricing from a retail standpoint. What we end up paying, homes come in standard from most of the factory specification levels with a 30-pound snow load. And then to go to a 40-pound snow load is not a bunch of money. It depends on the manufacturer. It's probably $2,000 to $3,000. But you jump to 60, 80, 100-pound snow loads, you can see that increase a total from a 30-pound snow load $8,000 to $10,000. So, and then if you get into different roof pitches and things like that, then your truss package totally changes, and then some of your costs for those snow loads also change based upon what you're doing there. So initially it sounds like, okay, a couple thousand here, a couple thousand there is not very much, but when you add that to all the other things during construction that we're having to accommodate for, just in the last, and I get we did COVID and the whole bit, but I mean, we've seen 30% increases in the last 5 to 6 years that customers are having to pay, maybe more than that in a lot of areas. And now we've got WUI and everything else. It can get very expensive.
But we're not talking about increasing from a 30 PSF ground snow load to 80. I mean,
No. So I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
We're not trying to change wind and snow loads. What we're trying to do is we're trying to see what we can do for ranges, right? What is a range that we should put these regions in so that it's not a substantial increase in price from going from one region to the next. So if we said, let's just say there's 5 regions, right? Let's say we came up with 5 regions and we said, anything less than 40 and then anything less than 60. Is that too big of a jump? Do we need to break it in from anything between 30 and 40, 40 and 50, 50 and 60, or can we just do anything less than 40, anything less than 60, anything less than 80? You meet those regional requirements. So we're not trying to change anything. We're just trying to group.
So you're trying to define a regional constraint and take away the engineer's responsibility of looking up the snow loads for that particular location?
No, not necessarily, because you're designing a structure to meet the minimum requirements for that area that it's going. So even if let's say you built a structure that was a minimum 40-pound snow load and 120 mile an hour winds, well, anything or any location within Colorado that has a 30-pound or less, or I can't remember what I said, 40 pound or less, and 120 mile an hour or less, it can go to that location. So they're not taking responsibility of the designer from making sure that the structure meets the requirement. You're just kind of like, you're designing the structure to meet a region instead of waiting for a site-specific address to design the structure to. So you can build like if a manufacturer wanted to, they can still build site-specific, right? And say like, hey, we're just going to do this specific location, or at least that's my understanding. And then or they can build a lot model, right? They can build an inventory and say, hey, we're going to build for these regions, And then so we can only sell these homes to customers that are installing these homes in those regions, right?
This seems
Yeah.
redundant to me.
Just
They've
in-
already got a data plate with this information on it, and you can easily look up the wind and snow and seismic information on ASC 7 tools. So I don't understand why we would break the state up into regions when we can just design
Well,
for
and
this snow, this
Justin,
wind.
yeah, and that's what I was going to clarify is that there are wind and snow load maps out there. But what we have found is that sometimes the local jurisdictions have exceeded.
Right, like for the wind load for all the state in per the administrative code is 115 mile per hour, even though on the new wind maps and the newer building code, you might be down to 107 miles per hour. So you don't get to take that benefit. So actually Colorado's already penalizing the designers for wind uplift connections on your roof, because 115 mile per hour on the new code versus 115 mile per hour on the old code, the new code's got 20-30% higher wind uplifts than the old code, because they're using those different factors for the area on the roof. Component and cladding pressures on the walls stay the same between both codes, but that's why I've always balked at when I do a Colorado job. I have to use that 115 mile per hour. They're already getting that 30% hit. Now, if we're talking about going to 120 mile per hour, it's going to be way over designed for what it needs to be.
Thank you.
Yes,
Meg,
we're
you
happy
had your hand
to-
up?
Yeah, thanks. So just to bring up, because you're really hitting the nail on the head as to the challenge that we have. So a large percentage of all the building standards are already standardized. This bill 002 sought to deal with those environmental, climatic, and geographic conditions that were site specific, with the goal of trying to standardize even more of the design across the state in a meaningful way. So we were looking at not making 115 mile per hour wind loads across the state, instead just applying it where it is the most applicable versus having to do a different standard for every single municipality. So you're hitting the nail on the head of the challenge of over engineering, so to speak, the buildings within a region. But what we heard really loud and clear from the industry when we were contemplating 002 is that there was some stomach to over engineer within a region because of the cost savings of being able to build to scale. So I think that is really the middle ground that we're trying to hit with these individual factors that are currently site specific.
So this will be an alternative or an option for the manufacturer to either design site specific or to a region. Like if they want to build their fleet, they can say, we're designing to this region. And that's what we're trying to discuss here.
Essentially, yes.
Okay. And I get that. I mean, there are manufacturers who build just purely fleet units for leasing, and that region thing would make sense. But at the same time, it doesn't, because they're already doing it. I mean, they just leave it up to the engineer and say, hey, we want to put it in this area of the state, determine what the worst case loads are, and then we go look up and we say, okay, it looks like the worst snow load in this geographical area is this. And I understand Colorado's different because, like you said, there are snow maps. You can't just go to one location and decide, yep, we're here. We meet the worst case, because it would, I see what you're saying. You'd have to go to several documents to find out what is the worst case.
And I think what we're trying to do, Justin, is to promote some consistency across the industry, to provide a regional status that the industry can rely on, and not do a gotcha for missing something in a local code or choosing another direction.
Mm-hmm.
Good discussion.
Well,
Well said,
again,
Nate.
back to the discussion of cost. Again, I don't think the snow is going to affect the cost all that much. Wind, I also don't think it's going to affect all that much. Since we're talking about regions, maybe the lowest in one region is 115 and the highest is 125. Let's say that. I don't think going from 115 to 125 is going to cause a huge increase. Usually there's plenty of capacity in your lateral force resisting system. Your shear walls usually have enough capacity. They might be over, and now we're just talking about extra fasteners in the shear wall, extra hold downs for your roof. But you know,
And so,
fasteners, I
Justin,
would
this
think
is
are
Nate.
relatively cheap.
Justin, this is Nate. I agree with you, and that's kind of where I was saying it's not like relatively, it's not that big of a price increase. And so, one thing I think that's important for everybody to understand here is that SB002 is not trying to find cost savings for housing through lowering building standards, right? We're talking about where the breakpoints are, just because they might help us inform where, you know, some regional cutoffs are. But the cost savings that SB002 is pursuing is through standardization and the efficiencies gained through that process, not just because, you know, we're lowering snow loads by, you know, 10 pounds in some region. And so, you know, because the analogy is that, can you imagine like what your Ford truck would cost if it had to be built to an address that had a unique set of requirements for some in Summit County, right? The reason why cars are affordable is because they're standardized. And I realize we're not going to get to that model in Colorado. But the closer we can get to that, there are a lot of cost savings available for standardization, and that's the cost savings that SB002 is trying to drive towards.
And I also want to clarify too that my experience is all in commercial, not residential. So I think it would still apply residentially versus commercial. But at the same time too, we're not only discussing residential.
Right, Justin, we are talking both residential and non-residential, and your input's extremely valuable to that. To this, I appreciate it. Sean, you had some other folks went before. I was going to follow up with you, Sean Rose, on your breakpoints on your snow load. Do you have similar breakpoints on the wind load? Are you still online, Sean?
Oh, sorry, my mute didn't go off. The wind load probably not as much, just it kind of depends on the manufacturer. There are varied price differences there, but it's not as extreme as the snow load can be. And again, like I say, we can get different snow loads, and most everything we deal with is a live snow load on the roof. And then it has to be, you know, then we have to make sure we're meeting the ground snow load for the area. So, but yeah, I would say that's the biggest one, is the roof load, or is the live load that we're dealing with.
Okay, thank you.
I've never seen manufactured price differences on wind loads over my years as a dealer. So
Good to know. Dean?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in, and granted, something like a 3-story apartment walk-up is probably going to be design site specific and not follow the regional standard. But when we are talking about wind loads, they are an aggregate on a larger building, either non-residential or multifamily residential. The context, I think, and what we're heading for is how to make the single family product more affordable by standardizing and systematizing. But I mean, the difference between, you know, a 2-sided OSB sheathed wall and a 1-sided OSB sheathed wall on 150 units is a pretty big deal for a factory. But again, I don't know that necessarily is germane to the objective of this, because we just don't see those kinds of similar impacts on single family. They're just much smaller product. And so somebody made the point, usually they wind up a little bit over designed in terms of lateral capacity and whatnot, just for the transport component.
Thanks, Dean. Folks, we're at 12:15, so are there any of these other discussion points you guys, anybody have a passion for tackling before we wrap up today's meeting?
Hey, Sam, I did want to ask the TAC some real quick for the installers.
Okay.
certified installer stuff. So if nobody has any other questions or any talking points, I'll go ahead and go. I'm not sure if Dean, you have something else or you just forgot to lower your hand. Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So just real quick. So to try to kind of finalize and close up the installer registration part, one of the things that came up was the certified installer. So if you look at the definition again that I shared in the chat, you'll see that definition says, oh, I have to pull it back up myself, that it means a person or business entity authorized to perform the installation of, and then those items, right? So when we're talking about a certified installer, you can read that as a certified installation person or certified installation business, right? A business entity. So when we're trying to put the draft together, we're trying to figure out how do you say that a business is certified if the business itself is not the one that's doing the installation, right? At least logically speaking, the business is not the one that's doing the installation, it's the person doing the installation. So how do we write the rules to be able to clarify what a certified business entity is in the certified portion of the rules? There's some thoughts, some discussions on, that same idea that the business doesn't do this installation, the person does, but how can you have a certified business? And I guess there's a couple ways. Maybe everybody within that business that is an installer have reached the status of certified installer, which would mean that the business as a whole can be certified, right? Or if you have one person that's certified, could they do inspections for other individuals that are registered with that business? So let's just say, Sam and I are installer or work for the same business, right? And Sam's the certified installer and I'm just a registered installer. If I do an installation, can Sam come do the inspection for my installation because we work for the same company and he's the certified installer? Can he certify my installation, right? Now, there might be some conflict there because of the inspector requirements, because it's a separate registration requirement in statute. So we got to look into that, right? But is there any ideas that you guys have that you can email about on how you think that how do we certify a business if a business is registering as a installer?
And so Donnie, I'm glad you brought that up. So that is something that Donnie and I have had some conversations about. And the older, more senior TAC members have heard me talk about responsible party, right? And another way to look at it is for those, especially the new TAC members, a registered installer doing a residential unit has to call for an inspection, and we go out there and do that, and we place the installation tag insignia on the unit, right? A certified installer can place his own insignia on that unit and not call for an installation inspection. So is the responsible party here the business entity by allowing the certified installer that is under their working for their corporation? Is it okay for them to put the installation tag, installation insignia on those units, even if the on-site person was a registered installer? Does that make sense to everybody? Donnie, did I get that right?
Yeah, I believe so. It gets confusing because it's again, we have to make sure that we account for business entity being part of the installer. So that's the tough part, right? Again, as I said, a business is not doing the installation, a person is. And if you go through the definitions, and that's going to be important here, because I think I did that. I forgot to do that once on when we were coming up with the drafts here. But when you're looking at the definitions of an installer, it tells you what an installer is, but then there's definitions for installation, right? And then it also talks about what are the responsibilities of the installer, and the installer is the person that is supervising the installation, right? So how can you have a business doing a certification of an installation if the business is not necessarily the person that's on site, right? Or how do you have a certified installer certifying a registered installer's installation if the certified installer is not on site either, right? So in some cases, it might make sense because, you know, when a registered installer does an installation, they schedule an inspection with us or the participating jurisdiction or a third party to go out there and do installation inspection for them, right? And they don't have to be out there on site because they see everything because it's left open. But on a multifamily installation, it doesn't make much sense because how does that certified installer certify an installation for a registered multifamily installer if that certified installer is not on site, right? They would have to be on site. And if you're a business and you're sending multiple people to different locations, how does that one certified person get to every location and observe the installation for multifamily? So in some cases, it might make sense, but in other cases, not so much. So,
and we don't have Matt Mitchell on, who's our installer rep on TAC today, but we did have a side discussion with him too. And we've also talked to Tawny. But if you guys have any thoughts on that, please send them to me because we've got to come up with a red line version before the next TAC meeting.
yeah.
All right, the next meeting, we're going to look at the final red lines for rulemaking 1, and then we're going to dive down, and I'll start fleshing out a little bit more detail on these other areas in rulemaking 2 to continue to have these discussions. I will ask if, based on our wildfire mitigation discussion today, would you like somebody from Colorado Fire Prevention and Control to kind of be available for discussion and comments and questions? And we're pushing this to rulemaking 2, but we still got to get on top of it, right? No comments. Okay. With that, I am going to wrap up today's meeting. The next one is actually August. I got to look at that date. Is it August 19th? Is that the right date for that meeting? I believe it is. So we'll look at those final rules there. And if there's, again, please, if you have any comments on anything that we've talked today, if it wakes you up in the middle of the night and you want to shoot me a text or an email, please reach out to me. And we will see you guys at the next meeting. I'm going to stop the recording.
All right. See you guys later.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Sam.